Hello everyone, this is Vickie Hoffman, Chief Academic Officer at North Union Local Schools and OSRC Zone 3 Board Member. I'm here with an exciting interview today of Danielle Prohaska, Superintendent of Mechanicsburg Exempted Village School District. Hello, this is Vickie Hoffman and I am interviewing Danielle Prohaska, Mechanicsburg Exempted Village District Superintendent. So Danielle, tell us just a little bit about yourself to get started.
Great. Thanks, Vickie. As you know, my name is Danielle Prohaska. I am the Superintendent of Mechanicsburg Exempted Village Schools. This is my fourth year as the Superintendent. I am a mother of three beautiful children, a wife, and very thankful for the community that I'm able to support.
Great. So explain your background, your path, and the current position, and so the audience can get a sense of who you are and where you came from.
Great. I have a non-traditional path to the superintendency, and that path really began in small rural schools. So I think this is a great fit for this podcast and for the OSRC organization. So I began as a speech pathologist and supported several rural schools through an ESC as a speech language pathologist. And as a speech therapist, I started to realize really quickly the limitations on resources and on program development that small schools faced. And that really got me interested in looking at other forms of administration. During my time supporting those districts, I had to think about unique ways and innovative ways to create programs to service students. And through that position, I began to think about how else I could lead and develop programs. And so I started to look at pupil services as a leadership and as an administrative certificate. And from there grew into other leadership positions. In the small rural schools, you wear lots and lots of hats. And as a director of teaching and learning and working with pupil services, I had the opportunity to learn a lot about buildings, building operations, schedules, program development, curriculum, professional development, and all of that really prepared me to move into my position as the superintendent. But it's unique because I never led a building myself, and so typically you see leaders move up through teaching positions into building principal positions, and then on up through there, through that type of pathway. But my pathway is a little different. I also had the experience of working with several shared services leaders prior to becoming a superintendent. Mechanicsburg shares a treasurer with North Union, as you know. We also had a shared services superintendent prior to me taking over as the superintendent. And so during that time, I really gained a perspective for the different ways that small rural schools have to allocate their resources in order to prioritize student learning.
So can you tell me a few of the exciting things you're currently working on?
Sure. I think as a leader in education, there's always change and excitement going on. So that's something that I think we're actually getting used to change and excitement in education. But this year, the administrative team and I are going through work with the R Factor, which is from Tim Kite and Urban Meyer's book Above the Line. And the exciting thing about R Factor is that it's giving us a common vocabulary to use with each other. And we're really talking about what's the outcome that we want for our organization. And based on those outcomes, how can we manage our responses to really leverage the best outcome for our students, for our districts, and for our communities. So we're really excited to engage in that work with each other because our own professional development is really important, that we have to be lead learners if we're going to lead the learning in our districts. We are doing something different with professional development this year also, and we felt like we were always missing a subgroup of our teachers when we were providing professional development because we know that one size fits all isn't appropriate for students, so it can't be appropriate for the teachers as well. And so we've done personalized professional development calendars this year, really giving back PD time to the teachers and allowing them time to engage in book studies and action research and vertical teaming time so that they can learn from each other. the one thing about small rural schools is that we have to really capitalize on our local experts, and so we're trying to do that this year in our professional development. Personally, my kids keep me really busy, and I always enjoy doing things with them. I have my first high schooler, so I'm getting used to what it's like to be the parent of a high schooler. I've decided that I'm going to go back to school, so I started my doctoral program 3 or 4 weeks ago, and so that's creating some additional challenges on how I can find balance between everything that I do, but it's exciting nonetheless. And I guess the last thing would be I have joined the board of directors for the Union County YMCA, and joined the board of directors because we felt like there was a gap between the YMCA and the needs of the community, and we have really focused on how we can be better partners to the community, and more importantly how we can support families, and so I'm really excited to be a part of that movement.
Well, congratulations, that's exciting.
Thanks.
So what is your vision for education in your district and in Ohio?
So I like to start big and work backwards. That's kind of my learning style. So I think about Ohio and the vision for education in Ohio. We are embarking on a really exciting time in Ohio because for the first time in several years, we have a state superintendent who is really reaching out and wanting to be collaborative and talking about the power of collective voices. And we're seeing a movement within the superintendents and other central office administrators to come together collectively to share our voice. And so I'm super excited about that. I think that's the vision that we need for education, is that collectively, collaboratively, we can go farther together than if we go alone. And Ohio right now is on the verge of making those voices powerful enough so that we can really focus on the measures that matter for students. And we know that the state report card alone is not the measure that matters the most to our communities, to our teachers, and to our students. In the 4 years that I've been the superintendent, I have had one call about my district's report card, because that's not the measure that matters most to parents. And so in Ohio, we're really working towards changing that and gaining back that control so that we can really measure what matters. If I think about the district, my district itself, it's really time for us to start thinking outside the box and to use our resources in different ways. It's about innovation. It's about preparing kids for either employment, enlistment, or enrollment in post-secondary schools. It's about providing them life skills and teaching them what it's about to be problem solvers rather than admirers of problems. And I think we have to really be intentional about the connection that we make for kids, that you're learning something not just to know it, but you're learning something because of the application. What doors will it open for you? And we really have to embrace that expectations for students, and that our expectations for students really have to be based around their needs and their aspirations and their careers. And so I think we're at a point in education where we have to give up that this is how it's always been done, and we have to think about what are the new things that we can do, because we're preparing kids for a future that we can't even envision because things are changing so rapidly. Who knows what high school is going to look like in 3 years? Who knows what technology is going to be available for us? And so we have to start being innovative, because we're preparing kids in a traditional way, and their future is not traditional at all.
So was there a female or male role model that kind of guided you along your way?
So I say this to a lot of people and they laugh, but when I grow up, I want to be like Deb Delisle. Mm-hmm. And very early on in my career, I had the opportunity to hear Deb Delisle speak at a Women in Leadership conference. And when I heard her speak, I thought, that's the person I want to be. Her passion, her excitement, her composure, her unwavering dedication to doing what's right for kids is something that has always been inspirational and motivating. And when she talked, she encouraged us to use our voices and to stand up and to be strong and to advocate for students. And so that really resonated with me. Early on as well, I became a member of the Buckeye Association for School Administrators when I first became a director of teaching and learning. and Deb Campbell and Dr. Axner were very instrumental in some of those years in encouraging me and coaching me and really providing me some confidence and some guidance in pursuing administration. And then just personally, my mother is a wonderful person. She's the strongest person I know, and she always helped me believe that I could do whatever I wanted to do. And I watched how she raised us, and her composure and her grace and her tenacity and her strength, and watching that really inspired me to take those qualities on myself.
So in a field that's dominated mainly by females, why do you feel there are so few female leaders?
So this is an interesting question, because sometimes I think it becomes self-imposed. And I think back as to when I first thought about becoming an administrator, and more importantly, when I first was thinking about taking on a superintendency. And I remember thinking, like, maybe this isn't the right time for me. How's this going to impact my children? At that time, my kids were young, and what would this do to the family? And I was weighing the possibilities and the factors of so many people in making the decision. And sometimes we're looking for the perfect fit, and so we're not willing to take that risk or that first step because we continue to think, well, maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe I need to wait a little bit longer. How's my family going to handle this? And so we consider so many other factors that sometimes that inhibits our decision to move on in leadership. I also think that the sheer numbers themselves are sometimes daunting. So this year, 16.2% of superintendents are females. And so that number alone is intimidating, and women are not confident enough, sometimes not sure of taking that leap because the numbers are so small, and the feeling that, oh, well, this is a male-dominated field and maybe this isn't the right place for me, and maybe it's better for me to be a support person in central office. And so those numbers, I think, also limit the amount of females that are willing to take on that additional responsibility. The other issue is that this position, the superintendency, is sometimes a lonely position, and by nature, women tend to be collaborative, and that sometimes can create that sense of anxiety around moving into a position where you really do isolate yourselves in some situations.
Sure. So what are the differences between the way male and female leaders are perceived?
So I want to preface this answer with the fact that I myself don't personally feel like I've ever been in a situation where, because I was a female, I was perceived differently, or that I didn't have as many opportunities as anyone else because I was a female. So this podcast isn't really about highlighting the differences between males and females, rather than talking about there is a gap in the data. And the gap says that only 16.2% of leaders, superintendents, are females. And so we're addressing the data, and we're addressing that gap in the data. I think the main difference in perception comes around how emotion is perceived. Because how many common phrases are, oh, you sound like a girl, or you cry like a girl, those kind of things. There is emotion around how women are perceived to be emotionally and how men are perceived to be emotionally. And so I think the difference in perception comes down to how emotion is perceived by others. So you have a female, myself, for example, and when I show little emotion, because sometimes, that's the feedback that I get, that I don't show enough emotion, that's perceived as somebody who might be hard or callous, where a man who shows little emotion is considered to be firm and fair. So the difference comes down in how people think you should respond emotionally. I think the other issue would be females that are over emotional are seen to be dramatic or too soft, where men that show a large amount of emotion are seen to be compassionate and understanding. And so that perception on how we should really wear our emotions plays into that. I think the other thing too is that females are aware that they are in the minority, and therefore we become too guarded in how we show emotion and how we engage with people because we are worried about the perception of emotion, and so therefore we kind of exacerbate the situation unintentionally.
So you talked about a little bit about how females are perceived. What kind of different perspective do you feel females bring to leadership?
I think I go back to the question earlier where I said when I was getting ready to move into the superintendent position, I considered so many other people before I considered myself. And I think that is something that females bring to leadership, that perspective of considering the many implications to those around them. Women consider the ripple effect. When I thought about moving into the superintendency, I thought about my kids and my husband and my family and all of the other, my friends and all of those other things and how that would impact leadership. And I think that's what we bring to the table. We are looking for collaboration. We are looking for consensus. We are looking for building the capacity of others. We tend to listen longer and when making decisions. We're factoring in other perspectives, such as what it means to be a wife and what it means to be a mother. You also know research says that women, when they're ready to apply for a job, will look at every single qualification and think, oh, I don't have two of those, I'm not going to apply, where research says that men who may have only half are going to apply anyways. And so females bring in that perspective of so many other people, not just themselves. I think that females also tend to look at multiple different perspectives and multiple lenses when they're making decisions. Some of that comes from that sense of wanting to be so well informed, and so I'm not sure exactly how to put this into words, but I think about gathering so much information to make sure you're making the right decision instead of sometimes just making the best decision in the moment and then being able to go back later on and say, now that I know more, maybe I'll do this differently.
So how do you motivate or influence younger females to pursue a career in education?
So I think about how I really started to think about leadership, and a lot of it comes down to the coaching and the role models. And so I feel very strongly about my my need, my ability to do that for others. Somebody did that for me, and so I feel like the call to do that for others. I started off being very active in the Women's Leadership Committee through the Buckeye Association of School Administrators, and that's something that they're actively addressing right now, is how can we recruit and support female leaders. And so I think part of my role is to continue those efforts to look at and to identify those female leaders that might be educators in my district, and then to really try and make those connections with them. I think it's important that we give a glimpse into our personal lives and how we balance our personal lives and our professional lives, because in order to really inspire and motivate young female educators, they have to see what that life is really like. They have to see that it is possible to balance being a mother, being a wife, being a professional, being somebody who has outside interests. And so I like to talk a lot about myself and my family and my children and my profession and how they all interplay with each other in order to give them that glimpse and really that encouragement. I remember sitting down at my first Women in Leadership meeting and having a female superintendent in a southern district talk about what it was like to be a mother and to be a superintendent, and how she took her children to after school events so she could still be visible at school but still spend time with her families. And all of those things really provide that support and that encouragement to young female leaders. So the best thing that I can do is to really model that and to share as much as I can. I have asked, the Women in Leadership Committee is making a very concerted effort to get women superintendents out as mentors, and to make connections with local organizations. And so I think that's another way that we can continue to grow young females in education.
So why do you value OSRC?
We talked earlier about the changing landscape in Ohio and the opportunity that we really have in education right now in Ohio. And if you think about OSRC, they become a vehicle for our voices. We know that rural schools have a challenge, just like urban schools and suburban schools. We all have challenges, but OSRC is really designed to focus in on our unique challenges, and they're that vehicle for us to come together collectively and collaboratively to share our voices. And we know that we can go farther together than if we went alone. And so I think it's really important because ORC has formed to provide us that vehicle to offer resources, to learn from local experts, and then to collectively come together so that we can make our voices heard not only in a regional level, but on a state level and a national level. I think it's super important that we continue to network with each other. We can learn so much from each other. And in an age where resources are so limited, if we can partner together to share expenses, to share talent, to bring in partners, that's just going to provide opportunities for all of us. Anytime we can collaborate, share, and network, we're going to be better off in our positions as leaders. And the other thing that OSRC will provide for us is another network of professional development. We cannot be stagnant in education. Education is changing so rapidly. And as leaders, we sometimes neglect our own professional development, and ORC really provides us an additional opportunity for professional development. If we want to stretch innovation and learning in our districts, we have to stretch ourselves in those areas. And so OSRC becomes another opportunity for us to do that.
Thank you, Danielle. I've enjoyed spending this time with you, and we've learned a lot about you, and we appreciate your help.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.